We are live.
Okay, we're in Revelation chapter 13. And the last time we did this, before I had to miss for illness, we got to verse 5 because I took a really long time and went through stuff very deeply. This time I'm going to go quick, but we'll go back to verse 1 just for a review. So in this chapter, you finally learn about the Antichrist, who is the political powerhouse, and the false prophet, who is the religious powerhouse. In chapter 10, you remember John was told to eat the little book and prophesy about people, places, nations, kings. In chapter 11, the temple was rebuilt and the two witnesses came on the scene. He had to have the two witnesses because the church is already gone. There's nobody to speak the good news. So there were two witnesses. In chapter 12, Satan was cast out of heaven for the second and final time. He's not allowed back in there anymore after that. The Antichrist and the false prophet will finally merge the church and state worldwide. This is something that many people want, but when it finally happens, I don't think they're going to be very happy about it because it's the Antichrist that's going to get it done. Winston Churchill said the purpose of a new world order is to bring the world to a one world government. Woodrow Wilson talked about it in a good way. Obama talked about it in a good way. He called it the transformation of America. And it's an effort to create a one world government. We have now a World Bank, a World Health Agency, the World Trade Organization, two different world courts. The United Nations wants a world constitution, a world currency, and a world income tax so that we would all pay a world income tax, just like we do for the United States right now. They want a military more powerful than any other military in the world. They have a number of nations and they have already created a military. And they call it the Army of Peace. So some of the world leaders, well, they want more than that. They want what's called a global ethic. A global ethic is another word for a one world religion where everybody believes the same thing. The Antichrist will finally accomplish that. And, you know, when he does, if you don't worship that way, you're put to death. That's what the Antichrist is going to do. And remember the last time I read in the book of Daniel, chapter 7, we talked about Nebuchadnezzar building that big statue and requiring everybody to worship that beast. Okay, that beast was a replica of Nebuchadnezzar and had different layers. Each layer represented a different world government that happened over a period of time. Started with Babylon, then Assyria, then the Egyptians, then the Persians and Medes. Then Rome was made of iron. Each layer was made of something different. The head was gold. That was Nebuchadnezzar. Rome was iron, and it crushed everybody. What's left is the feet, and they're made of clay and iron. They're not very strong, but that's the world government that we're going to be living in. So in John's day, when he wrote this book, 5 of those world governments were already history. He was living in the 6th one, which was Rome. So it's slowly happening. The global ethic, again, means one world religion that no one can deviate from. So I'm going to go to verse 1. Then I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. So the dragon stands on the shore of the masses. Okay, that's the sea. The sea stands for masses of humanity. The land stands for Israel. So the Antichrist comes out of the sea, but the false prophet is finally going to come out of the land. The seven world governments will be run by the. Now, this is different. Gets confusing because this is a different set of world governments. The Antichrist has 10 regions. So those are the horns that are on this dragon. 10 of them. 10 regions. And he takes over 3 of them over a period of time, and he becomes so strong and does so many miracles, or what they think is miracles, that the other 7 finally just go ahead and give him their power too. So he ends up with an entire world government. The 7 world governments, he ends up with one world government with 7 kings, is what I'm trying to say. So he has this divided into 7 divisions, or 10 divisions to start with. When, I'm going to tell you this, a few years back, the United Nations wanted to divide the world into 10 regions. And these are the regions that they wanted to divide them into. Region 1 would be Canada and the US. Region 2 would be the European Union. Region 3 would be Japan. Region 4 would be Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and the Pacific Islands. Region 5 would be Eastern Europe. So, and it goes on to 10 different regions. That didn't happen. But I'll tell you something, this is not in any of the books or any of the documentaries that I read, but ultimately we're going to have 7 different cities, okay, or 7 different governments, all run by the Antichrist. A few years back, you hear people talking now about the G7, okay, that's a group of nations that meet. Well, I wonder who came in. Anyway, used to be the G8. In 2014, Russia invaded Crimea. And when he did, Russia was kicked out of the G8. So now it's the G7. So this part is kind of tricky. Let's see, I'm going to skip some of this. So this is another point of contention, that some people think that 10 horns that came up, that the Antichrist was one of those horns, and he eventually tore out the other 2. Some people think he's a totally different person. It doesn't much matter. He ends up with 3 world governments, or three different crowns. And eventually the other 7 turn over to him as well. So I'm going to go to verse 2. Now the beast, which I saw, was like a leopard. His feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority. So the dragon, remember, is Satan himself. The beast in this verse means his world government. And it will begin as a mixture of 3 nations, like I said. The only, what nations these are, different authors have different opinions about what nations that they actually are, these 3. I don't have any idea. The only one I feel sure about is the bear. That's probably Russia, because Russia is the symbol of the bear. And I think in this, Russia is a group of nations. So you already know it used to be the USSR, and now it's just Russia. But they took Crimea back in 2014. They're trying to take Ukraine right now. And after that, Putin, or whoever is his successor, is probably going to try to put back together the USSR. And they might succeed. I don't know. Who knows? So verse 3. And I saw on one of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world marveled and followed the beast. So this is after he had the 3 nations. He already had control of those 3 nations. And something happened where he was mortally wounded. Now there's contention there too, because the heads represent governments. So it could be that one of the governments was mortally wounded or appeared to be mortally wounded, but yet it came back. Or it could be that he is a person and he was mortally wounded. But based on some future verses in this chapter, I think that it's talking about himself. I don't think it's talking about the governments that he has set up. So, go to verse 4. So they worshiped the dragon who gave authority to the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him? So he is mortally wounded. He has control of 3 countries. That is what we would call the leopard. And they are in charge of all important matters. And the bear repeats what he says, and the lion parrots the false prophet rather. So now in verse 4, this healing that he does is going to be a miracle, and people are going to believe that he is the Messiah because of this healing. And this is one of the big reasons that the other 7 nations cede their power to the Antichrist, because of these miracles. Now it's at this time that Satan, this is the middle of the tribulation where we are right now. Satan always wanted to be worshipped, so he sets up in the temple and announces that he is God. And the false prophet has a statue built of gold of the Antichrist and insists that everybody should worship it, just like Nebuchadnezzar did. So these people now have made him king of the world, I guess you could call it, and they don't remember his failures. They don't remember the pestilence. They don't remember the hunger. They don't remember the inflation. They don't remember any of these things. All they know is that the miraculous things that he did, they're actually ready to go to war with him if need be. Verse 5, he was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and was given authority to continue for 42 months. So we're at the middle of the tribulation. That statue that was built and set in the temple of the Antichrist is the abomination of desolation. Okay? It's an abomination that he declared himself God and had people worship this statue. Desolation. It's at the same time that these things are happening that Jesus told the masses that they need to go on to the mountains. So Israel becomes empty of people. There are hardly any people there. Now you remember, I think it's way back in, it was either verse chapter 7 or 10, John was told to measure the temple and measure the number of worshipers. And when he got in there were no worshipers of Jesus left. None. Not one person. So, and another reason that he got to be in charge and the other nations gave the power up is because they were in desperate need of a leader that could bring peace. And you remember when the first seal was opened, the first horseman that came out was the white rider on the white stallion. And he went out to conquer and conquered. He had the bow, which is the symbol of peace, but no arrows, which is the symbol of war. So he went out preaching peace. That's the same thing that the Antichrist and false prophet do. But once they get what they want, it's not going to be any peace. Okay. So in 6, verse 6 is a very simple one. Then he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, which is his church, and those who dwell in heaven. Anything that had to do with God, he was going to blaspheme. In verse 7, it was granted to him to make war with the saints and overcome them, and authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. Some would say, why would God let these people do this to his people. God gave everybody every opportunity to come to Christ. The tribulation is the last effort to come to Christ. So he's given the Antichrist complete control. In the future, these saints' prospects are going to be bright, but right now, multitudes are going to be killed. So, when we talk about this to people, sometimes they don't want to hear it. But if it saves even one person, it's well worth it. So, what's left of this statue at this time is the feet, made out of clay and iron. This is the age of the Antichrist that we live in right now. It will be crushed by a mountain-like image. It don't say it's a mountain, but it says something like a mountain. Verse 8, all who dwell on earth will worship him, whose names have not been written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. Okay, so anybody whose name is not in Jesus' book of life is going to be worshiping the beast. And, God and Jesus don't predestine everybody to do what they're going to do. But once we're here, they already know who is going to worship the Antichrist and who is not. So Jesus already has their names written in the book because he knows what's going to happen. Okay. Verse 9. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. Well, that's a cool one there because we didn't go over the 7 letters at the beginning because I thought that they're kind of boring, and they are. But we'll do one of those letters next week because chapter 14 is very short. If you read in those letters, at the end of each letter, it says, if anyone has an ear, let him hear. And let's see, what is the other part? It has about, let him hear what the Spirit is telling the churches. He's sleepy. So let him hear what the Spirit is telling the churches. Well, the churches aren't here anymore, so he didn't say that here. That's an indication of a pre-trib rapture because the church is not here. All right, so verse 10, he who leads into captivity shall go into captivity. He who kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. And here is the patience and faith of the saints. All right, the Old Testament talks about this as an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Whatever you do to somebody else, you can expect that to be done to you. In the New Testament, it's called what you sow, you will reap. So if you kill somebody with a sword, you can expect to be killed with a sword. That's pretty much the way it is. Verse 11, then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. This is the false prophet. So the false prophet comes out of the land, which represents Israel. The Antichrist came out of the sea, which represents mankind, humanity. This guy, the Antichrist or the false prophet, will look like a lamb as he's trying to imitate the Lamb of God. He'll condemn racism, sexism, poverty, and discrimination. All the things that we'd like to see. But underneath, there's a monster. He'll use his power, which is equal to the power of the Antichrist. And he'll use that power to promote the Antichrist and a one-world religion and government. Eventually, he'll require everybody to worship the Antichrist, using force and even death if necessary. We read that in Matthew chapter 24, verse 24. And so verses 13 and, I skipped over one.
You're on 10.
And I saw no, okay, I did, okay. So that was verse 11. Verse 12, and he exercises all the authority in the first beast. I skipped reading that, but that's what I was just talking about. He uses his authority to do that. So verses 13 and 14, he performs great signs so that he even makes fire come down from heaven on earth in the sight of men. When he does these things, it's going to make him look like God. He deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on earth to make an image to the beast who was wounded by the sword and lived. Again, this is the abomination of desolation. But you remember way back in the book of Job, terrible things happened to Job. And all the people thought that this was the work of God. But the fact was, it was Satan doing these things to Job. And he caused fire to come down from the sky and burn up his lambs. He could still cause fire to come out of the sky, but it's not God. But that's what the people are going to think. So it's very important that as we go through this period of time, that we use a lot of caution in deciding what are works of God and what are works of Satan. So, verse 15, he was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. This is pretty much saying that he brings this gold statue to life. And we know the only one who can possibly give life is Jesus from scriptures in the past. There's no way he can do that. So in this modern time, could it be a robot? I don't know. Could be something like that, some kind of artificial intelligence. So anyway, verses 16 and 17, he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, that no one may buy or sell except who has the mark of the beast or the number of his name. Boy, man, you could make a whole lesson out of just that one verse. But the mark of the beast is going to be in the palm of the hand or on the forehead. And I said this before, I see the apps where people can go to Marco's Pizza and they get 50% off of a pizza if they have the app and use it. So what do? They hold up their phone and they scan this phone on the right hand. Why do people get the app? Because it's cheaper to buy things. What if someday they say, oh, you can't buy it at all unless you have this? You can't do business. Now in Europe, and it's Aldi's that's starting to do this, they're using eye scans. So your credit card and all the information is right in your eye, and they can scan your eye. The eye is very close to the forehead. I said, this is not stuff I've read, but I see it. And I'm thinking, 2,000 years ago, John had no idea what a telephone was. And what's the mark of the beast? The number is given there, it's 666. But what does that mean? Well, there's no way we're going to be able to know who the Antichrist is until after the rapture happens. And probably we won't know for sure for quite a while after that. But I don't know. So anyway, a lot of the prophecy experts see the ultimate effect of the mark as a cashless society. That's, I know a lot of people don't know this either, but we have what's now called radio frequency ID tags, and they're in almost everything you purchase. Okay, everything has it. And so they're trying to do this, they're trying to make this and barcodes the same worldwide. So if you buy this cup in the United States, and all this is done, every nation in the world is going to know you have this cup. And they're gonna know how you paid for it, because it's all done with these scans and cards and all that kind of thing. So, anyway. Get away from this, okay? In verse 18, there it is. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it's the number of a man. His number is 666. So, when you think it's the Antichrist, way back at this time, we have alphabets and we have numbers. They did not have that back in John's time. They had one symbol. So an A, for instance, might be number 1. So it could be number 1 or it could be A. B would be number 2. C would be number 3, and it would go on and on. And the Greeks had one system and the Hebrews had another. So you take your name and you fit it into that alphabet, and when you're all done, you add up those numbers and see if it comes to 666. That's a good indication that it's the Antichrist. So what this is talking about, he who has wisdom, or here is wisdom. So yeah, I have no idea how to do it. And the numbers that I used as an example, that's just to make an example. But anyway, this is chapter 13 in here. I know I went off quick. There's just in this one book alone, there's probably 10 or 12 pages of information. And I've watched documentaries that, talk about different things. You could take chapter 13 and make a whole semester, I think, at a Bible. In fact, I did. I took a 9-week class on the book of Revelation at Dallas Theological Seminary. 9 weeks, just on Revelation. But they spent a whole class period on chapter 13. It has a lot of information in it. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good week.